G.
G. Arroyo. All right, everyone knows his dad, by the way, as well. Better be good.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
I just want to, does this work?
Yep.
Right? Although if you didn't hear me, you can't answer that question. My name is Felix Arroyo. I'm very proud to stand here today as your city councilor representing all of Boston neighbors with 4 at-large councilors. I have over a decade of experience as an organizer and as a public servant. But in fact, my story doesn't really begin with me. In fact, my Boston story begins with my parents, who moved to this city from Puerto Rico looking for a better opportunity for themselves, and at the time, my older sister. They moved here speaking very little to no English. They didn't know anybody. But they really believed that Boston would be better for them and for their family than where they were. But like many families, they needed a leg up. They needed affordable housing, subsidized housing. And they found that in the South End. And that's where, when I was born, I was brought home to the South End. From there, my parents were able to put their pennies together and buy a home in Hyde Park, which is where I was raised. When my father was dream come true, first time he ever lived in a house, he thought he made it. Right? That was the definition of the dream for him. But like a lot of things, he put everything he had into that home. So winters for us very often consisted of opening that oven, putting it on high, and that's where I did my homework outside there, because that's where the heat came from. Boiling water on the stovetop, because that's how you got a hot bath. But I'm blessed with the parents that I have. They used those moments to teach me and all 5 of us, there's 5 of us in my family, that it's not about how big your house is, how many cars you have, how much money you have, but it's about how many people's lives are better because you existed. I tried my very best to live my life to that quote. They also taught me to be grateful we have another. As an organizer, I started at SCIU, where I organized janitors and security guards. Most people don't see them. And in fact, many perceive them to be powerless. But I knew that by organizing, and we knew that by organizing, and by bringing voices together, very much what's happening here right now, that they in fact were powerful. We were the ones who paid them. They went from making minimum wage to $15, $16 an hour. Now that's not a lot of money, I'm going to tell you it is. But when you go from minimum wage, you get to $15 an hour, that changes things. They went from having just single family, single insurance health care. This was before what we call Obamacare. So they just had single health care. They went to get family health care. I'll tell you one thing, I've never met a janitor who said I wanted to be a janitor when I grew up. What they all say is they're doing it for their family. So can you imagine the evil irony that you're cleaning someone else's toilet to provide for your family, but when your child is sick, you can't bring them to the doctor? We were able to win family health care, but most importantly, the respect and dignity that I believe all people deserve. Having gone through that battle for health care, I saw how important that was in people's lives. I'm a lifelong asthmatic. It's key to me. I decided I want to be a part of the effort to make sure everybody had health care. So when our president was elected, he said he was going to fight for universal health care. So I wanted to join that fight. So I ran New England for an organization called Healthcare for America Now, where we were fighting and organizing to make sure everyone had access to health care. I'm proud of the work we did, and I'm proud that now we have some semblance of universal health. From there, I ran for the city council. And I just want to thank, there's so many people in this room who are part of both my elections. My first one in 2009 and my second one in 2011. I was victorious in both, and I'm blessed. I didn't do that alone. There were a lot of people who believed in me, who knew we weren't always going to agree, but knew that I was going to get to work with them to try to make our city a better city. There's a few things I understand. This is about all neighborhoods. This is about opportunities for everybody. My entire campaign is based on the belief that everyone in the city deserves opportunities. Everyone in the city deserves a safe people that they can afford to live in. But they also deserve to have a voice in the direction of our city. And there are a few key pieces of legislation that I've been moving that I'd love to share with you so you get a sense of how I think. One of them I call Invest in Boston. It's about how do we create economically sustainable neighborhoods. When the employment rate goes up, you know what goes down? Crime rate. There's a direct correlation. We know that. So here's the idea. The city of Boston has over $1 billion deposited in banks today. Your city But we don't ask those banks if they lend to small businesses in our neighborhoods. We don't ask those banks if they lend to homeowners. We don't ask them if they're refinance loans for the constituents I have paying 12% on their mortgage when the market's calling for 3 or 4%. You know what the difference between 12 and 4% is? We don't ask them if they hire Bostonians. We don't ask them if they support development projects. They can find space. We really don't know if they're doing any investment work, any lending, any work in our communities. But they get $1 billion a year money. So legislation on right says, you're going to tell us what you're doing in the neighborhoods. And there's going to be Bank A, Bank B, and Bank C. And it turns out Bank C is the only one doing work in our neighborhoods. Who should we do business with? Bank C. The legislation that says you're going to tell us, they want to pick the bank doing the most part. That does two things. That gives more capital to the bank actually lending to our neighborhoods. But Bank A and B, they're not walking away from $1 billion. They're not going to do what? Compete. How do they compete? We just told them how they compete. By doing work in our neighborhoods. Also, I'm mindful of time and Chip. I'm going to go on your lead here. All right? Schools. That matters to all of us. All 5 of us went to Boston Public Schools. My family, like most families, wasn't one of the options. It was the option. You had to go to schools. Told you all 5 of us went. All of my nieces and nephews of school age, they go to the Boston Public Schools. My mom is a retired BPS teacher. My wife is a 2nd grade teacher in the Boston Public Schools, and my sister's a 2nd grade teacher in the Boston Public Schools. My father was a teacher before he was elected official. The state of our public schools is quite personal. I think it starts with a universal pre-K. So it's not lucky to draw whether or not you can get to the pre-K, but in fact they have a seat. I think you have to have 2 adults in those early years. About early child education, this is how we get there. Up until 3rd grade, the child is learning how to read. From 3rd grade on, they're reading to learn. And we know that if at 3rd grade they're not reading at level, school's going to be just that much harder for them every year thereafter. So let's do everything we can to make sure that by the time they're in 3rd grade, they're reading at level so that the rest of their school, they could be on par or ahead. So who does? My wife does it. How does she do it? No cost to the city. She partnered with Simmons College. Now there's a graduate student in her classroom year round. Now there's 2 women. So it's not Jasmine with 24, it's 1 to 12. Big difference in the scores going in her classroom. And it's possible. I think we also have to extend our school day. But not for the sake of extending the school day. It's to bring back arts and theater, music, phys ed, and sports to every child in our city. Also, it's like a treat, right? Dessert comes after the meal. So there's something to look forward to. Imagine being in math class, knowing that you get through that, you're about to be practicing for the school play. Or in your fine arts class. Or in your baseball. And it's good for that child's development. Also, I think we have to look at our high school curriculum and really revamp it. I've already been moving to introduce Black, Latino, and Asian studies into our schools. 87% of our schools are people of color, and they deserve to learn about themselves. We've been moving to bring financial literacy to our classrooms as a requirement. Because when you walk into a high school and you ask them, how many of you want to own a home? All, and if not all, most will raise their hands. But then if you ask what a credit score is, you don't get the same response. You've got to prepare them and give them what they need so they can fulfill their own dreams. I think you have to bring civics to our classrooms, science, technology, engineering, math. Many of the jobs in Massachusetts revolve around science, technology, engineering, math. You'll hear it called STEM. I may use the word STEM, but that's what we're talking about. All of our high schools should introduce a child to that. College prep classes. See, what I know is that for many of the students in the Boston Public Schools, when they go to college, they're going to be the first, and if not the first one, but few in their family to do so. So we can't assume that there's somebody at home who knows how to go through the college application process, who knows how to fill out the financial forms, who knows how to fill out the scholarship forms. We should do that in our schools. And that does 2 things. It helps them get through that process, but it tells every child, we believe all of you are able and worthy of going to college. And also, I think we've got to look at Madison Park High and turn that building around. We have the potential to have the best tech school in the state, but we don't. And it's in Worcester right now, but we can use the model to get it done. And I'm wrapping up here just to say, Felix, running for mayor, I'd be honored to have your support. In the end, it's all about opportunities for everybody. Right, Chick, good morning.
Thank you. People, just raise your hands. I'll call on you. We have 15 minutes for open-ended questions. All right? I'll do it. All right? Please go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Arroyo, do you support the idea of an independent civilian police review board?
I do.
And who do you believe should serve on that board?
So I'm not so clear about that. I support the concept,
yes.
and as mayor, we will work towards that. But I want to see how other cities are doing where it's working, right? It's not actually working in other cities, but I believe it's working in some. But I would lean on folks like you who have an interest in it. I would lean on folks who know how to make that done and get it done. But I do absolutely support it, the idea of a civilian review board.
Thank you. Okay. Another hand, right here, please.
I have 3 really quick questions, maybe 4.
Okay.
School committee, elected or appointed?
So I support a hybrid school committee where some will be appointed and some will be elected, and allow me to explain why a hybrid. Our school committee has never been more diverse than it is now as an appointed school committee. Never. Right? Through an appointed process, you can make sure that certain perspectives are there, including race, gender, right, neighborhoods. So, and also that certain expertises are there. But through the elected process, you can work to ensure that there's more parent accountability. And so I think through a hybrid, you get both. Right? So I would support a hybrid.
Okay. 2 things. There's a lot of violence in certain areas of Boston. And since my brother here has been keeping count since the beginning of the year, there's been a certain amount of, and you were at the city council hearing last week, and Bernie and Hall, we talked about that and some of the plans. Do you as mayor have a specific plan on how to squash, how to deal with the violence specifically in the Latino community, Black community?
Yeah. So it's a holistic approach, right? One, I believe we have to go right back to community policing. The idea of police officers actually walking and bicycling in the neighborhoods. Right? When was the last time you knocked on the police car's window to tell them what was going on? Right? It's rare. I'm not saying somebody hasn't done it, but it's rare. But you're more likely to have that conversation and create a relationship if it's a real person walking your neighborhood or bicycling your neighborhood that you know, that you see periodically. Right? And we see, so I see some neighborhoods where it's happening and other where it's not. I think we got to go right back to it. 2, it's that word opportunity again. But as long as it's easier to get a gun than it is to get a job, we're in trouble. Right? And we have to fight for youth jobs. I've led the effort on the city council around youth jobs, both summer and year round, but we're nowhere near the number we should be at. Right? We employ 10,000 young people in the city in the summers, but we believe it's about 14,000 actively looking for jobs. At least 4,000 wouldn't get a job. And never mind the year-round numbers, it's low, right? And so we have to look at what are we doing for our young people outside of those school hours and creating those opportunities. And in the short term, we got to create safe havens where young people know, and everyone knows they could be in it safe, where they can congregate, where they can create community, where they can meet each other. And it's in that creating community, right? When our social capital goes up, our crime rate also goes down. So it's holistic, but it's about our economic development, access to jobs, good jobs, real jobs. It's going to be around the relationship with our police department and make sure that there's a mutual relationship of respect and trust. And then it's around making sure that young people have safe places to be. And it's deeper than that. There's no magic answer. The most important idea I can say is it really takes an investment of all of us who want to see our neighborhoods as safe, putting eyes on that street, grabbing those people who we think might be up to no good, because those are actually good people, and try to bring them back in.
So I have enough.
Hold on. I gotta pass it around. Hold on 1 second. I gotta pass it around. I'm gonna give it to Mr. Janey because it was time to call it that. I gave you 2.
Just 1, and then I'll get 1 later. Thank you, Councilman Greg Janey.
I didn't know there was a letter. Just really quick.
Greg Janey, representing Mass Minority Contractors Association. I have a question around construction contracting opportunities, specifically with the MBE utilization program that was abandoned several years ago in the city of Boston so that there were no more goals. Understanding the fact that it was challenged, which is why it was dropped. question is, are you interested? We'd like to see it reinstated. Because the fact is that the population of minority contractors has spiraled down since that program has been abandoned. And so we're looking to obviously increase the population of MBE contractors. So I want to know if you support reinstatement of that program, not jobs. I understand 50, 25, 10.
Yeah, I know. It's a little different. I know. The jobs is about people working the site. You're talking about people getting the contracts to actually do the work.
Correct, minority business.
Yeah, who owns that just to be clear, what he's talking about, which is separate, I can talk to both in the same answer, but you're specifically asking about the company being minority owned or
correct. I'm
owned by a
speaking
person of
about
color.
minority owned, and what has been put in its place is a designation they call small businesses. The obvious issue with small businesses, that could be anybody, any race. We want to target MBEs. When I say we, I'm speaking on behalf of the organization for MBEs. So I guess the question is, will you look to reinstate that program, the MBE utilization program for the city of Boston?
Yeah, and yes, and I would work with you and anyone else interested to figure out how to reinstate it in a way that's also challenge groups that I think can last, right? But the answer is yes.
Okay.
Right, that's not a kick in the can. The answer is yes.
Okay. And then, okay.
Go ahead. Anybody else around here? See him going back and coming back? Right here, please.
With the school assignment, how do you see supporting, as mayor, how do you go about helping to implement the school assignment plan, or what you're doing with the school assignment plan?
Want to repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. So he asked about school assignment plan. I supported the most recent plan done right now, but with some reservations. But what the plan now is, it's a home-based plan, so you put in your address and it tells you what schools are near you. However, if you don't have what's designated as quality schools within your basket, then those schools also get put in your basket, right? In the end, no, I don't actually believe that any assignment plan would have led to the result we're looking for. Because the result we're looking for is a good school or a quality seat for every student who goes to the Boston Public Schools, right? So one of the ways it was described by someone else, not me, was it's as if we have 40 apples on the table, and we're trying to figure out the fairest way to take those 40 apples, have 100 people who want one, but yet only 40 get them. And we're trying to figure out the fairest way of doing that, right? So I think we're onto something here with this process that would be the home-based style, but ensuring that you have quality schools within your basket to choose from. But we're never really going to be in the right track until we focus on every school being a quality school. And so that's why I spoke a little bit in my opening about some of the ideas I had about how do we get to that place where every school is a quality school. Early childhood education, extending the day to include arts, theater, phys ed, sports, looking at our high school curriculum, making sure it's reflective of what I believe, and I think many would believe, is happening today as opposed to yesterday, right? I think that's the key.
Okay. Jamal.
A couple questions in one. One, since you've been city councilor, if you could talk to us a little bit about the staff in your office. What's the diversity been like? Specifically, how many African Americans over the years have you had working for you on your staff? Number two, you may have seen the challenge that we issued in regards to your response to the Arizona, what we all agree were ridiculous immigration laws, and your move to ask the city of Boston to divest their funds from Arizona. And our challenge was that we were asking you to take the lead on a similar stance, divesting the Boston funds, leading that charge in regards to the Trayvon Matin Zimmerman not guilty verdict in Florida. And then lastly, in your bio and your pamphlet here, there's no mention at all of Chuck Turner. Many of us in this room know you worked for Chuck, and you know, for several years. You start off kind of at the SEIU, and I wonder, A, since he's been incarcerated, has there been any contact? And then B, since you took that vote, you were one of the people that took that vote, and now that you know in the court of law it's been proven wrong, has anybody apologized?
No, there hasn't been contact. I did speak to him after the vote, but not since he went away. But I did have conversations with him while he was still in Boston. You know, that was a very difficult vote for me, and I thought what I thought was right. I know there are people who disagree and people who agree, and it's part of the nature of my job, but I did take a vote. As far as the question about the diversity of my staff, I'm actually pretty proud about the diversity of my staff. The most I've ever had is 5 staff. At times I've had 4. I've always had a majority of color staff. Today, there are 2 blacks, and 2 Latinos, and a Brazilian. sitting right in front of you is my chief of staff, Joy, who lives right in Roxbury. And my staff has actually always been majority of color. And I represent the entire city, and I see that to be appropriate. As far as the question around the divestment from Arizona and whether I would take the lead for that divestment from Florida as a result of the decision on Trayvon Martin, I did see it, had some conversations with a colleague of mine, Tito Jackson, who represents this area, lives around the corner, and he has told me that he is going to found something, and I'll be supporting it.
Thank you. Cynthia.
I have a question. What is your solution of not having all of one type of people in one area, like Section 8 people in one area? So how can you spread that equally among the sections of Boston?
I'll repeat it. It was the question was essentially how do we make sure that we talk about economic class here though, right? Around affordability housing.
Yes, not all concentrated in one area.
Yeah, the question is around what can we do to make sure that affordable housing isn't all concentrated in the same area or communities, neighborhoods,
Yes.
right? So that's the question. How can we make sure that affordable housing isn't all concentrated in the same communities? That's our question. Here's the answer. In Boston, there's an ordinance that says when you develop a housing development, at least the minimum number of 15% should be affordable, right? But there's an out, and the out is that you would pay into a fund instead of building those units. What happens is that it is actually cheaper in many cases to pay into that fund than to actually develop the affordable housing unit. And when you present an option that's cheaper to the developer developing it, they may be inclined, because of the affordability of actually just paying into the fund, to not develop the affordable housing. And so I think it's time to look at that ordinance and say, if it is actually more affordable to the developer to pay into that fund and not develop the units, which was the intent of that law, then we should look at those numbers and make sure it's reflective of today's reality so that it is not cheaper, so that paying into that fund is the equivalent of more than developing the unit. And then you see more units throughout the city as opposed to just in some of the neighborhoods.
Great. Saleh, we have a question? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
You talked about having
Yes, he said, how would I went through the education platform, she said, how would I pay for it? Right? So, here's the answer. I think many people are surprised to hear that we actually spend $1 billion a year on our schools. 118 schools, about 118 schools, around 57,000 students, and we spend $1 billion into that system. I don't think most of us believe we're getting our money's worth for that $1 billion. So I'll give you one example of what I think is wrong that's very personal to me. 9 years ago, my wife was her first year teacher. So she went into the Lee Academy School on Talbot Avenue, where she taught for many years, first grade. And her first day in, they opened up the classroom for her. First year teacher, first day in. And they told her, this is your classroom. We look in, and it was completely empty. I'm not trying to be descriptive, I'm actually using the dictionary definition of the word empty, right? So immediately we went and put ourselves thousands of dollars into that classroom. This is 9 years ago. I didn't have that just laying around. We had to figure this out. I mean, I own about 25 books that kids put their backpacks on. And it's funny to hear, but it's not funny that that's the reality of what happened to us. What I believe is happening is we're not budgeting our schools the right way. So if we take $1 billion and when we do our budget and we come from here and we end up there, right? I think you pay for it by saying, here's the priority of this money. The priority is what's happening in these classrooms. And once you fund those classrooms, then you work your way up. And if you have to pinch your pennies, you're pinching your pennies up here, not in these classrooms. I think with $1 billion, there could be real dramatic shifting in how we do our budgeting. Thank God budgeting is an annual process that the school department is led by the mayor and the school committee. But I think that if we just shift our priorities and make it the classroom, you'll see dramatic changes in our budget.
Okay, we have like 3 rapid fire questions. We're going solid. Rapid fire, rapid fire. Okay.
Very quickly, Councilor Arroyo, I'm wondering, if the elected mayor, what will be your posture in dealing with either one or both of the major public safety unions, one being Local 718 for the firefighters, and also the policemen's union, the police patrolmen's union for the police? Someone asked a public safety question earlier. I'm a firefighter. I'm a member of the Boston Society Vocals.
Yeah, I know.
I don't know if you know, but among us, we don't have a great reputation. We feel as though some of the stances that you've had alongside of Local 718 were complicit of some efforts that we found denotary to communities of color. So I'm wondering, for instance, there was an initiative to introduce a Spanish-speaking program into the Moon Island firefighters training facility that you had a stance on that we felt as though could have been rethought. Is it something you need to be reminded on? I'm just saying, we felt as though this was an initiative, knowing 718, and knowing that most of the time, 10 issues, we agree maybe on 9, maybe on 1. So we felt as though this was a perfect vehicle to introduce more Latinos, specifically Latino firefighters, candidates to be hired by the fire department. We felt as though you took a contrary stance to this. We could have a private conversation afterwards, but we feel as though, and I've had conversations with people from the executive board of Local 718. And we feel as though that they don't have a great perception of you either. But still, we feel as though you've been supportive of them. My question is, if elected mayor, will your posture change in dealing with them, or will it basically stay the same?
I didn't come out against the hiring of more Spanish-speaking
Different information.
Sure, I'd love for you to show me that, and I know I did not, right? Sure. But what I believe in the diversity of our workforce. In fact, with Council Percy held hearings, but it's not about the firefighters, but around the police department, about how we can create a more diverse police department. I held those hearings with her, in conjunction with her, maybe at the request of Mamleo in my first year in office, and I've worked with Mamleo on those issues. I don't know how often I worked with both, probably not enough, frankly. My position on 718, the time that I was very close to them, was around the firefighters contract, right, and around making sure that firefighters were paid for the work that they do. I actually believe that benefited not just the white firefighters, but every firefighter who was on the job.
And probably financially, you're right.
Yeah, no, yes.
But we have more concerns than financial.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is, very clearly to you, I believe the city of Boston and our workforce should be as diverse as our neighborhoods. I'm open about that. I'm in the newspaper saying that. I said it at my kickoff. Very loud and proud about that, right? How do we get that done? That's the question. How does that happen? One, when they say to me that they have a veteran preference for the jobs, that doesn't scare me away. I know that there are a lot of black and brown veterans coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan right now. I know that for a fact. So it's about going to where they're at, recruiting them, and having them take the test so we can see more black and brown firefighters in the job.
Follow that up. There was one. This is the last question, but we do have just real quick.
Sorry.
I know that there's a lot of us have a lot of different questions.
Yes.
But how was that when you was running for city council up at Hibernian Hall? And I spoke to all the representatives, and I asked about when we going to try to get back, Black history in school curriculum, and this is something that's very important to our children, and you all gave a very good speech about what could be done and the efforts that y'all would make, but nothing has been done yet.
Yeah, so myself, along with Council Jackson, actually filed legislation to bring Black studies, Asian studies, and Latino studies to our schools. The reality is that our school department is led by our school committee and our mayor, right? We can hold hearings on the issue, but it's our mayor and our school committee that can implement the change in curriculum. When I get to be mayor, I can assure you that there'll be Black and Latino and Asian studies in our schools. There's no doubt in my mind about that. The reason I know anything about the Incas or the Aztecs or the Mayans, right? But we're all the descendants of kings and queens, whether it's African kings and queens, or Latin American kings and queens, or Asian kings and queens. The reason I know about that is because my mom and dad made a point of sitting me down and talking to me about that. Not because I learned that in our Boston public schools, right? We cannot make the assumption that everybody has Felix and Elsa at home. In fact, 5 did. I don't know about everybody else's home situation. What I do know is our schools have responsibility to teach our children about themselves, and when 87% of our schools are people of color, then we should in fact introduce those classes. And I have legislation that I wrote for Council Jackson represent the area, asking to bring those studies into our schools.
I'm coming as the Grim Reaper. All right, coming right now. But everyone, please give it up for City Councilor Felix Arroyo. Can you please introduce your campaign staff who to follow up if they need it? Just anybody in the room?